Russia continues to threaten the United States with nuclear destruction. First and foremost, I want to give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rachak Wadash. Double honors to the elder apostles and the elder bishops of Great Millstone, who rule very well, very beautifully. Double salutations to the Akim her pushing this gospel in truth and in sincerity to the best of their ability, given to them by Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai. Peace, blessings, and salutations be unto the elect scattered abroad. May the election of Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Lord willing, fall upon your houses. This is Brother Quanah Watts from the Arizona Great Millstone Camp. Come back at you, Lord will, with the edifying lesson through the spirit and power. Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai. Lord will, it is edifying. Lord will, it is straight to the point. And I'm going to say it again. Russia continues to threaten the United States with nuclear destruction. As you see right here, it says Putin, hitman, threatens to blow U.S. to hell with radioactive tsunami as World War III fears explode. And we are in the time of World War III. Recently, Russia ultimately put out a simulation. I think it was the beginning of this year, if not the end of last year. Pretty recently, nonetheless, Russia put out a simulation video of them dropping a nuclear bomb. It was either 50 or 500 miles off of the coast of the UK. And that radioactive tsunami was so big and so powerful that it wiped out all the UK, went as far as, north to wipe out Finland, Sweden, Norway, even wiped out over half of Europe. And that's just with one nuclear ICBM missile. And again, Russia is threatening the United States with nuclear destruction. And we understand that they have been mass producing these nuclear missiles, man. So that attack on America, right? It's not just going to be one missile, man. Scriptures talk about 200,000, right? Which, when you add it up, right, it's going into 200 million nuclear warheads that are going to be used, right, to destroy this place, man. Right, and we're going to get into it. But first, we're going to get into this article. Right, I got two articles, right? It says a prominent Vladimir Putin propagandist has unleashed a scathing tirade against the United States on Russian television, warning of nuclear tsunami that would obliterate the country in response to the potential U.S. sanctions aimed at crippling the Russian economy. Right? It says as the Ukrainian conflict rages on, Putin has repeatedly employed nuclear saber rattling to deter Western nations from providing military aid to Ukraine. Recent weeks have seen an escalation of Kremlin threats to unleash a nuclear Armageddon upon Western countries. Because at the end of the day, they're getting fucking sick and tired, of the Western bullshit. America is ultimately aiding Israel in the genocide of the Palestinians, right? Sending them money, sending them military equipment, right? As well as they are aiding Ukraine in this war against Russia, And, for the beginning of the actual war, America tried to hide, right, that it was funding this war, right? The war between Russia and Ukraine, right? America tried to hide it, but it came out, right? America's been funding this whole war this whole time, right? As well as, again, right, America is funding Israel, who is at war with Syria, at war with Yemen, right? At war with Jordan, Iran, right? Hell, even America is at war with Iran, Which, right, that right there is the beginning of World War III, right? And we understand that Jacob's trouble has to ultimately happen before that that final climax of World War III, which will be the use of ICBM nuclear missiles. But see, we're listening and seeing and hearing about World War III a hell of a lot more than we have in the last 10 years. The last few years have been, World War III this, World War III that, World War III this, World War III fears. 10, 12 years ago, we weren't hearing about that, man. Which just shows you the times that we're in, right? As scriptures say, right? Measure thou the time diligently in itself. 2nd Ezra, the 9th chapter. And we're doing that. And we're seeing that World War III is on the brink. It says, the largest target of Putin's nuclear ire is the United States, as the U.S. Senate considers a new sanctions package designed to strangle the Russian economy. Kremlin mouthpiece Vladimir Solyev leveled a scathing diatribe against America during one of his TV programs, right? Dad makes friend dig on gray. That's not it, right? It says, President Trump announces Russian trade deal after excellent call with Putin. The U.S. imposes sanctions against Russia, secondary sanctions, right? So it said. It says Solyev continued, just wondering, does it say anywhere? We order Poseidon not to raise counter-radioactive tsunamis that will blow the entire continental U.S. of America to hell, leaving only... No? It's not spelled out anywhere on the Senate sanctions list. No? Well, that's right. There should be no illusions, none at all. You want to destroy Russia? I will remind you once again, why do we need a world if Russia is not in it? So they're saying, fuck it. You want to go ahead and put sanctions on us? You want to go ahead and try to cripple the Russian economy to destroy Russia? Well, we're just going to fire missiles on you. We're just going to destroy you. It's basically the sentiment that they are facing. It says Solyev's inflammatory remarks demonstrate the Kremlin's continued reliance on nuclear intimidation and underscores the increasingly volatile global landscape as tensions escalate between Russia and the West. In 2023, Russia rolled out the first batch of its nuclear-powered and nuclear-armed torpedoes, dubbed Poseidon, capable of traveling vast distances, man. So they've been making these, nuclear missiles, man, for years now. Right? Even prior to 2023, man. Right? Russia has been on their shit when it comes to these nuclear weapons, right, being created. Right? And we understand, according to prophecy, they're not created just to sit there. Right? The Lord said what? Let's go ahead and grab it. Right? In Isaiah 54 and verse 16. Right, it says, behold, I have created the smith that bloweth the coals in the fire. Right, and that smith is ultimately going into these, these nuclear scientists that, they're able to split these different atoms, and molecules, right, which create a new, create that explosion, right, that reaction, right, which then leads to that explosion, man. And then again, right, they entrap that power, that force, right, into a missile warhead, which is then used, right, and the explosion is vast, right, greater than any explosion that has ever been created, right, including like the atomic bomb, and so on and so forth, right. A nuclear ICBM is far greater than that of an atomic bomb or a regular cruise missile or whatnot. It's unmatched power. And the Lord has these scientists creating these things, which is, which is where these scientists are at, right, over in Russia, right, Germany, right, over here in America, you got nuclear scientists, really all over the world, you got nuclear scientists, man, creating these nuclear arsenals, right. It says, and that bringeth forth an instrument for his work, and I have created the waster to destroy. So this is what these, missiles are created to do, to destroy. So they're not just, to sit there on the shelf, right? They're not just meant, right, to be used as a point to threaten. No, they're gonna be used, man. These ICBM nuclear missiles are going to be used, right? And Russia continues to threaten America, right, with that nuclear destruction, you know. And here you go, Trump, right, going back, pulling up my second article, right? Trump over here says what? Trump unveils Golden Dome missile defense plan that could cost billions, right? So he basically saying, hey, we're going to create a dome system, right, which I'm calling the Golden Dome, right, which is ultimately mirrored after the Iron Dome over there in Israel, and they're going to establish it here in America. He ultimately, when he first came into office, he signed an executive order, right, to have it built and established, right? It says President Donald Trump on Tuesday announced plans to begin building a sophisticated new missile defense shield, estimating it would cost some $170 billion, and that much of the system could become operational in 3 years. The project, which will be called the Golden Dome, echoes President Ronald Reagan's failed Star Wars program, which was criticized for being overly ambitious and siphoning money away from other national priorities. And had they, ultimately established, right, some kind of missile defense system back then, right, they could have had that time to create, a missile defense system that actually could work. But see, that's not according to prophecy, right? It's prophesied that America, right, would ultimately be destroyed via ICBM nuclear missile, right? And when you look back at that Iron Dome, right, which you can look at videos, right, I think it was Iran that ultimately shot off missiles, right, into Israel, right, and they swear up and down that it worked, man, but it didn't. It worked for the most part, but you still had a lot of cruise missiles and missiles that were shot off from Iran. They hit down, so that defense system is only good, right, if the payload, right, that's being shot off, right, is smaller, like a few missiles here and there, right, not a huge barrage of missiles coming from different directions. It's not capable of handling that payload, and we see it, and they're trying to establish, that same type of missile defense system here in America, but it's not going to work, right? It says, we'll have it done in about 3 years. Once fully constructed, the Golden Dome will be capable of intercepting missiles, even if they are launched from other sides of the world, and even if they are launched from space, Trump said from the Oval Office. Right, so standing beside Trump, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said the program was possible now because technology has improved since the days of Reagan. The technology wasn't there. Now it is. Hegseth said of Reagan's Star Wars program, and you're following through to say we will protect the homeland from cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, hypersonic missiles, drones, whether they're conventional or nuclear, right? It says General Michael Gutian, the Pentagon's vice chief of space operations, was also in attendance and will lead the project, right? It says more. It says Iran launches attack on Israel. What is the Iron Dome? The design of the Golden Dome will integrate with our existing defense capabilities and should be fully operational before the end of my term, Trump said in announcing the plan. So we'll have it done in about 3 years. Once fully constructed, the Golden Dome will be capable of intercepting missiles, even if they are launched from the other side of the world, even if they are launched from space. Right, so this is their whole point, right? To ultimately establish this missile defense system that they believe is ultimately going to be able to protect even against nuclear, drones and whatnot, nuclear missiles, which is not going to happen, right? Because that's not prophesied in the scriptures. It's prophesied that Russia, as well as Russian allies, hell, even American allies, American allies are prophesied to turn on America and to side with Russia and America's enemies, right? And to fire those nuclear missiles. We'll go ahead and grab that, right? We get into the scriptures, Isaiah, it's like a Jeremiah 50 and verse 9. It says, for lo, I will raise and cause to come up against Babylon, right? Which you can look up, right? Who is the virgin daughter of Babylon today, right? And there's a book, right? I remember the elder Apostle Gabar, doing a lesson on this, right? There's a book called The Virgin Daughter of Babylon, and it mentions, right, I think on the actual cover, right, it mentions that America, is that virgin daughter of Babylon. So the average person, right, the average, so-called scholar and whatnot, they know that America is in the scriptures, right? Called the virgin daughter of Babylon, right? The whore, right? That is speaking on America. So this is who it's talking about when it says Babylon, right? So for lo, I will raise and cause to come up against Babylon an assembly of great nations from the north country, right? Which that north country being Russia, right? When you look at the maps, Russia is at the north, at the top, right, of the continent Asia, which again, that assembly is going to comprise of Russia and Russia's allies, which we can read in Ezekiel the 38th chapter, right? Some of those allies, right? Let's go ahead and jump to that real quick, and we'll go back, right? It says Ezekiel 38 verse 4 says, and I will turn thee back and put hooks into thy jaws. And this is talking about Russia, right? It's talking about those who are dwelling in the land of Gog, right? Magog, right? Which again, going into the Russians, right? Lord's going to turn them back into that USSR mentality where they get their hand hovering over that button, ready to push that button down and to release, right, like a slingshot, those ICBM nuclear missiles, right, those wasters, right, to destroy America, right? It says, and I will bring thee forth and all thine army, horses and horsemen, all of them clothed with all sorts of armor, even a great company with bucklers and shields, all of them handling swords, which the modern day sword, right, is the gun, right? So he's gonna gather his army, he's gonna get him ready, which we see, him doing that, right, even now, right, doing that even now, right? You got Russia and Ukraine at war, and Russia is mustering up, his army, right, his reserve, military and whatnot. Hell, they even, they got North Korean soldiers over there too, man. Helping out. It says right here, it says verse 5, and this is again giving some of these allies, right? It says Persia, Ethiopia, and Libya with them, all of them with shield and helmet, right? Which we know the Persians, right, are going back to the Iranians, the Carmanians, right? As you read in 2nd Ezra, the 15th chapter, around the 28th verse, right, calls them the Carmanians, which we know again they're to modern day Iranians, right? It says Gomer and all his bands, the house of Togarmah of the north quarters, and all his bands, and many people with thee. And when you go into the ancient maps, right, Gomer, is over there by Turkey, right? Meshech and Tubal, right, in Turkey. Right, Togarmah is over there by Armenia, just south of Georgia, right, Georgia, Russia, right, by the Caucasus Mountains, man, just south of that, So all those nations, right, the Libya, right, Ethiopia, right, those are Hamite nations, Persia, which is which are the Iranians, right, and then as well, right, you got other nations as well, right? Again, like you got North Korea over there, and then and they're getting all their militaries ready, right? Which Yahweh Shemel Shai is having this take place because of what prophecy, right? The valley of Yahweh Shaphat, right? the valley of decision, right? The Lord is getting these nations ready, right, for war, for that situation, right? The Lord's going to have these nations gathered in that area, and they're going to be fighting, just so Yahweh Shemel Shai can ultimately judge these nations, man. But I also want to go back because again, right, these are speaking on Russia and Russia's allies. But when you read in Jeremiah, it's like in Revelations chapter 17 and verse 16, it says, "And the 10 horns, right, which thou sawest upon the beast, right, these shall hate the horn." The 10 horns is going into the EU, right? The European nations that America has been allied to for so long, right? France being America's longest standing ally, right? Is going to turn against America, which we've already been seeing a lot of that, starting to happen, right? With the different decisions that America's making, right? And not considering, its own allies, right? Its own allies are sitting here like, hey, what the fuck, because the more sanctions that you put on Russia, the more it's going to affect, affect the Europeans, man, and the European countries, because a large portion of their, business and trade and whatnot comes out of Russia, right? Especially their oil, right? And whatnot, right? All that shit comes from Russia, because it's right there. It's a hell of a lot closer than America, So again, with the decisions that are different, that America is making, right? Those decisions are going to negatively impact, the allies of America, which these nations are already pissed off at the different, decisions that America is making now, right? And it's only going to continue to get worse. America is going to continue to, buck up, Scriptures talk about, that little horn, right, which is America, being more stout than its fellows, man, right? Being more, puffed up and, thinking, oh, I'm the shit, man. You got to listen to me. These nations sitting here like, all right, keep that same energy then, man, Because at the end of the day, what's going to happen? They're going to turn on America and say, fuck it, we're going to push that button too, right? It says, and the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore and shall make her desolate and naked and shall eat her flesh and burn her with fire. And how is that going to take place? Again, by way of ICBM nuclear missile, man. So it's going to be Russia's allies, even America's allies coming up against America, And there's nothing that America's going to be able to do to stop it, right? You can't stop that hellfire, right? No matter what kind of missile system you got in place, right? There's nothing that you're going to do, right? Ezekiel 38 and verse 11, it says, and thou shalt say, I will go up to the land of unwalled villages, right? When you have a village, right, with no walls, it means it has no protection, right? It has no defense, right? It might have a little small fence, but that's not going to stop a military. That's not going to stop, a fire from, burning the village down, man. That fence isn't going to work. And see that missile defense system, that Golden Dome missile defense system is likened unto a fence. Not an actual wall, a concrete wall around a castle, but more like just a little fence, man. You can kick the post over, and now it ain't doing its job no more. It's weak, right? That's what this Iron Dome is going to be, this Golden Dome, a remix of the Iron Dome is going to be like compared to these ICBM nuclear missiles, man, right? It says, thou shalt say, I will go up to a land of unwalled villages. I will go to them that are at rest, that dwell safely, all of them dwelling without walls and having neither bars nor gates. Again, no protection. It's going to be like taking candy from a baby, in a sense, right? America will be destroyed via ICBM nuclear missile. Let's go back to Jeremiah. Verse 50 and verse 9 again, it says, for lo, I will raise and cause to come up against Babylon an assembly of great nations from the north country, and they shall set themselves in array against her, against America. Right? From thence she shall be taken, their arrows shall be of a mighty expert men, none shall return in vain. Because when you read in Joel, the 2nd chapter, right, that these nuclear missiles, right, were created to destroy America, and the Lord is going to have them fulfill that word, right? What does it say, right? Isaiah 55. As the brother, Ayak always says, man, oldie but goodie, right? Isaiah 55, I think it's verse 11, right? It says, so shall my word be that goeth forth out of my mouth. And we know the mouthpiece is the prophets, right? The mouthpiece, Yahweh Shem Shai, is the prophets, and the Lord has been, through his men, been telling y'all for decades, really, right, for years, right, that World War III is going to come, right, that World War III is going to literally be the end, the war that ends all wars, right, and America is going to be a fucking plain by the end of it, man, a desert, right, a plain not as in a plane as in flying, or a plane as in like a plain color, but a plain as in a flat land, a plateau, if you will. America is going to be destroyed, right? It says, so shall my word be that goeth forth out of my mouth, it shall not return unto me void, right? meaning it just, came back and it didn't accomplish where it was supposed to go, or it didn't reach its destination, right? No, that's not the case, right? It says, but it shall accomplish that which I please, and it shall prosper in the thing whereto I sent it. So when the Lord speaks the word, you best believe that that's a check that'll never bounce, man. The words of Yahweh B'Shem El Shai, that's a check that'll never bounce. So when he speaks, when Yahweh B'Shem El Shai speaks that word, hey, best believe that it's going to come to pass. And we're starting to see it, right? The Lord said what in Habakkuk, the 2nd chapter, at the end it shall speak and not lie, right? And it's happening, right? It's being built up. We see the just as you are in the roller coaster and you're going to the top, you're kind of waiting, right? It's building up, right? The intensity is building up, and once you reach the top, you come down, it's screams and whatnot. Hey, we're in the build up, man. And we're almost at the top, right? We're almost about to round that peak, and then shit's about to hit the fan, So I'm gonna go back in Jeremiah 50 and verse 10. It says, "And Chaldea shall be a spoil. All that spoil her shall be satisfied, saith Yahweh. Because ye were glad, because ye rejoiced, O ye destroyers of mine heritage, because ye are grown fat as the heifer at grass, and bellow as bulls, your mother shall be sore confounded." And that mother is going into the UK, right? Because ultimately America was born from the UK, right? Going back to 1776, right, where America got its independence from, right? From the British, right? It says, "She that bare you shall be ashamed. Behold, the hindermost of the nations shall be a wilderness, a dry land, and a desert." And that's talking about America, right? America. This is ultimately the end goal for America, right? So it doesn't matter if you establish some type of golden dome. It don't matter if you try to build a missile defense system that's going to, in your eyes, right, going to protect you from all different types of cruise missiles and different torpedo missiles and whatnot. No, it's prophesied that America is going to be destroyed by way of ICBM nuclear missile, right? Hellfire, So it don't matter, at the end of the day, you could build 4 or 5 different kind of missile systems, man, in a 3-year span. None of them are going to work, right? None of them are going to work because it's prophesied that America is going to be destroyed, right? Verse 13, it says, "Because of the wrath of Yahweh, it shall not be inhabited, but it shall be wholly desolate. Everyone that goeth by Babylon shall be astonished and hiss at her plagues," right? And those plagues, are again right here. We're going to read it, Zechariah 14 and verse 12. It says, "And this shall be the plague wherewith Yahweh shall smite the people, right, that have fought against Jerusalem. Their flesh shall consume away their flesh shall consume away while they stand upon their feet, and their eyes shall consume away in their holes, and their tongues shall consume away in their mouth." And that's going to happen by fire, by nuclear fire, right? And radiation, because when there's too much radiation, man, it ultimately starts to burn your skin, right? You'll be standing there, you can't see radiation, right? But radiation will definitely make itself known, your skin's going to start burning, right? Your skin will ultimately melt off if there's too much radiation, And again, with 200,000, 200 million nuclear warheads, not only is it going to be an overkill of fire and radiation, right? It's going to be, it's going to scriptures talk about it shaking the earth, Scriptures talk about it, the earth shall reel to and fro. But I want to grab this one, which is heavy as well, Ezekiel 38th chapter. It says, verse 19, it says, "For in my jealousy and in the fire of my wrath have I spoken. Surely in that day there shall be a great shaking in the land of Israel." Because it's not just going to be America that's going to be destroyed, right? Israel's going to get it too, man, right? Because that land has to be cleansed. America has to be destroyed, right? Because there's so much blood that has been shed on this land. The scriptures say, right, that the only way that this land can be cleansed is to shed the blood of him that shed it, You know, so Yahweh Shem Shai is ultimately going to destroy this place, right? Destroying Esau, Edom, the different nations, and the 2/3 of the nation of Israel that's here. You know, that's the only way to cleanse this land, man. You know, and get a recompense for all the abominations that have happened here in America, man. Now think about that. Well, you know, the average shit that these Edomites have done to Jake, man, everybody knows that, man. You know, everybody knows what Esau has done to, you know, the Israelites, man. But there's so much more information that has not came out that if it did come out, hey, man, you know, Jake would snap, right, before it's time. You know, so that information is being held back until the proper moment, you know. And the Lord is going to get his recompense, right? Where, as it says in Obadiah, right, for thy violence against thy brother Jacob, right, shame shall cover thee, you know. And the Lord is ultimately is bringing all this information out, and soon, right, the Lord is just going to say, fuck it, you know. It's time, and this place is going to be destroyed. But see, again, the land of Israel is different, right? I mean, it's going to receive the same judgment, right? Destruction, but it's going to be built up. It's going to be built back up. You know? It's going to be built back up. America's not, right? Verse 20, it says, so that the fishes of the sea and the fowls of the heaven and the beasts of the field and all creeping things that creep upon the earth and all the men that are upon the face of the earth shall shake at my presence. So again, right, scriptures talk about the earth reeling to and fro, right? The fish, you know, jumping out the waters, man, shaking, getting thrown everywhere, you know, even the birds in the air, right? Imagine, right? It's not just the earth itself, but even the atmosphere around the earth is going to be shaking, man. Everything is going to be, you know, feeling that fury of Yahweh Shem Shai. You know, that's how strong and that's how angry Yahweh Shem Shai is at the wicked, man. You know, it says, and the mountains shall be thrown down, and the steep places shall fall, and every wall shall fall to the ground, right? All these different militaries and strongholds, right, of these different nations, right, garrisons. And hey, the Lord finna tear their ass up, man. You know, there's not gonna be any more, you know, of these militaries and shit, man. We read that in Isaiah the 34th chapter, right? The Lord, right, has a you know, indignation against these armies, right? A righteous anger against these armies, man. You know, which ultimately, again, goes back to the valley of Yahweh Shaphat. The Lord is ultimately building up this World War III, right? And gathering these nations and stirring up the minds of these nations, right? In order to be able to destroy these nations and their armies, man. You know? Which you can read that in, you know, Joel, the 3rd chapter. You know? These are the times that we are in, man. You know, World War III is you know, around the corner, if you will. All right, but I always bring out this scripture, man, and we'll close out with this too, man. It's Revelations chapter 11 and verse 14. It says, the second woe is past, and behold, the third woe cometh quickly. And when you go into woe, right, that's talking about World War III, right? The woe, right? The scriptures talk about it, World War I, right? World War II. And this is speaking on World War III, right? This is coming, man. Right? Habakkuk, the 2nd chapter, man. You know? And at the end it shall speak and not lie, man. You know, but that's all I got, man. Lord will is edifying, Lord straight to the point. I want to give all praise, honor, glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rachak Kodash, that belongs to the elder apostles, the elder bishops, great millstone. Till next time, I say shalom.